Okay, hi everyone. This is Kelsey Erickson Streufert with the Texas Restaurant Association. With me is Dr. Emily Williams-Knight, our president and CEO. And then we're very grateful to have two special guests from the Houston area with us today. We have Senator Carol Alvarado and Representative Jean Loup. Thank you so much for being here with us. To kick things off, I'm gonna just kind of introduce our guests, let Emily give a few words, and then punt it off to our elected officials if y'all would like to kind of make any introductory remarks, and then we'll just jump in to questions and get through as many as we can. We really appreciate you being here with us today. So Senator Carol Alvarado is the state senator for Texas's 6th district, which includes various parts of Houston. She was elected to the Senate in 2018, and before that, she served 5 terms in the Texas House of Representatives, where she served as chair of the Urban Affairs Committee and co-chair of the Select Committee on Transparency and State Agency Operations. Senator Alvarado's primary legislative focus has been on economic development, public health, and public education. She has championed legislation aimed at strengthening our state's workforce, regulating the use of e-cigarettes for children, and criminal justice reform. Before joining the Texas legislature, Senator Alvarado served on the Houston City Council from 2002 to 2008. Senator Alvarado is a small business owner, a native Houstonian, and a longtime resident of Houston's East End. She holds a Master of Business Administration and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from the University of Houston. Thank you so much for being with us, Senator Alvarado.
Hi, and thanks to the Texas Restaurant Association. Always good to be with y'all. In case you're wondering which one I am and which one Representative Wu is, I'm the one with the curly hair. It's always great to visit with folks on these virtual streams that we have. It's a way to stay in touch with everyone. Look, I know that the Restaurant Association has been hit the hardest nationally, losing 3 times more jobs than any other industry, and right here in Texas, 700,000 jobs. We know that although we've been opening up, that the restaurant industry has been, it's been a slow progress, but I want you to know that many of us support your industry and looking to work with you during the session. You've been great advocates for your members at the national level with perfecting some of the things that you needed from the PPP program. And here at the state level, we know that you've been very vocal and very active with various elected officials and leadership across the state. Like your industry is important to us because when you're hurting, it impacts so many people. I mean, we know that 60% of restaurant operators say that it's unlikely that the restaurant will be profitable within the next few months. And even prior to that, with what we had going on here in Houston with the oil and gas industry, we were already seeing a somewhat of a contraction, not like what we see right now, but we know that when oil and gas hurts, that hurts also the entertainment industry, restaurants, hotels, and we have about 4,500 energy companies in Houston. We're not sure how many will will have to go under. We've seen many of our great restaurants like Patronella's and others that have closed. And you're important. I mean, restaurants make up 50% of the food dollar, and so it's a very critical part of our economy here in Texas. So I'm anxious to hear what's on your mind and to also work with you next session. It is going to be a busy one. We're going to have a lot of budget issues to deal with. Many of us are looking forward, reluctantly looking forward though, but we need to hear the news of Comptroller Glenn Hager and his forecast, which will come out in July. We know that so many things are now are down. Sales tax receipts are down by 12.3%, the motor fuel tax down by 57%, and then the hotel occupancy tax down by 74%. So there's going to be a lot to do next session, and I look forward to being a partner with y'all.
Thank you, Senator. So our second guest is Representative Jean Loup. Representative Loup has served 4 terms as the state representative for District 137 in Western Houston. Prior to being elected in 2012, he served as a prosecutor in the Harris County District Attorney's Office, where he sought justice for thousands of crime victims. Representative Wu is currently an attorney in private practice, as well as a full-time legislator, I would say. Representative Wu currently serves on the House Appropriations Committee, which writes our state's budget, and on the Committee of Pensions, Investments, and Financial Services. He's known as a leader on the state's child welfare system, juvenile justice, criminal justice reform, and healthcare. Representative Wu grew up in Southwest Houston. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree from Texas A&M University, a master's degree from the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas at Austin, hook 'em horns, and a law degree from South Texas College of Law in Houston. He and his wife Maya are the proud parents of 2 sons. Representative Wu, thank you for being with us today, and happy to hear anything you want to share at this point.
No, absolutely. I really appreciate being here. You know, being from Houston, I was always very, very proud to tell people that we are the restaurant eating out capital of the United States. We have the absolute best food anywhere in the world, and it was such incredible diversity. And, you know, like Senator Alvarado said, I mean, this pains me. For me and my my wife, we going out to eat is more than just a weekly ritual. It's almost a religion for us. We're huge foodies, and we love the amazing things that we can get around here. And for us to, you know, I know, I mean, everyone's suffering, but you know, for us, like not being able to eat out was one of the biggest things. Being second house is not a big deal for us because we're kind of homebodies in the first place. But you know, and on the other hand, on the other side of that is, I think both Senator Alvarado and I represent a district and areas where a large number of people work in the restaurant industry, and as much as the restaurants are hurting, the workers that work in the restaurants are hurting as well. And, you know, I'm personally encouraging, when I talk to our congressional members, that I'm telling them they need to do more for our worker service industry. They need to do more for our restaurant industry. They need to protect not only the restaurant owners, but also the people who depend on those restaurant owners for a living. And we need to get everyone through this. And I think this is a time of unparalleled crisis, that this has hit us worse than I think anything within any recent imagination. And we don't even know where the bottom is. And that's the real key. And we don't know when this is going to end. We don't know when the vaccine is going to be available. We don't know what the numbers will even be like next week, because we're going back on a serious upswing. So I'm here to commit to doing everything I can, and I know Senator Alvarado as well. And we're going to put pressure on our congressional delegation to say, like, you guys need to keep going at it, keep doing more stuff, because we got to survive. We've got to get through this.
Great. Emily, you want to kick things off with some thoughts?
Yeah, at first, I just want to thank you both for being here. And I have to say, sitting in the seat now, well, 100 days into the crisis, just hearing your comments gives me so much hope for the future of our sector. You rightfully called out, I mean, not only have we been the hardest hit, but we also employ, if you look across our sector nationally, we're more than 47% minority in our workforce. We're down just in Texas alone, 700,000 jobs, and we don't see that recovering anytime soon. We saw the May national numbers. We recovered in our sector about 1 million jobs, but we lost 8.4. And so you can still see that. And I really appreciate the call to our employees, because you know, our employees are hurting, and if we can't get our restaurants back up and running, then our employees can't come back to work. And many of these employees, this is, you know, the one sector I think left in America that's your first, your second, your third opportunity in life. And so whether you're coming out of a correctional facility, whether you're coming out of a hospitality degree, whether you're transitioning late in life, there's a place for you in our sector. And so I think what worries us most is something Representative Wu said, which is that uncertainty. Restaurants right now need predictability. They need predictability in what's going to happen down this runway of at least 6 months before they're even profitable, to understand that the state will be there to provide some of the resources that we laid out in that restaurant survival plan. to say we've got to get Texans back to work, we've got to get our economy moving, and the way to do that is to invest in small business, especially in some of our city communities where we know that people are not at work and they really want to be at work, they want to go back to work, and we want to create that environment for them. So I can imagine how busy you are, especially in the Houston area, and I just want to thank you from our industry for being here first, which shows so much about your belief in who we are and what we're trying to accomplish, but also that we're really eager to partner on the next session. And we know it's a difficult one, but we know there's certain things that really will help us survive and help us take care of those employees that we all care so deeply for. So thank you again.
All right, so before we kind of kick it off with questions, just want to remind folks sort of some of the efforts that TRA is really leading on from an advocacy perspective. We mentioned the PPP, that's still a critical program, and getting some flexibility around some of those parameters has really helped some of our businesses. But still they're looking at those deadlines, right? They have to spend all of the money, and they're wondering what it's going to look like after that. So we're still working on more targeted relief at the federal level, particularly for our sector and the rest of hospitality, which has just been so hard hit. We're working on targeted liability protections for those businesses that do follow the protocols and do the right things to protect their employees and guests. At the state level, which is something we really want to dig in with both of our guests here today, we're really working on the Texas Restaurant Survival Plan. And that's an 8-point plan. We'll go through some of the pieces today, but it's really about how do we get restaurants through the unknown, through this period of challenge and great uncertainty, so that they can kind of pivot and be successful in this post-COVID world. And then of course we continue to work with our local leaders as well on everything from face coverings now to parklets, all sort of different strategies to continue to invest in our sector. So Senator Alvarado and Representative Wu, would love to just kind of hear from you to start off. You know, how do you think our state's responding to this crisis, and how do we balance these sometimes competing interests of protecting health and safety while also protecting our economy, because of course we can't afford to lose that either. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I in a little bit of a mixed bag. I think what we've had to grapple with is mixed messages from different levels of government. You hear, one thing from the White House, something else from the governor's office, and then the local elected officials. And this is one time where I think we could have used a lot of consistency, especially from the very top, starting very early. I think we were very behind on testing. Testing has been the key to this, and it's something that many of us, myself, Representative Wu, advocated for. And now what we're faced with in right here in Houston and Harris County is that FEMA has been administering a lot of the testing, and they are trying to pull out at this time, and which is terrible timing because the demand is so high that both of the sites, the FEMA sites for the county, are at their capacity. They're reaching 750 capacity every day. We have mobile units that are around the city, but I think having some uniform set of guidelines would be helpful. And the communication has been good. We've had numerous calls with the governor. We have regular calls with the lieutenant governor and with Chief Nimkid and all the other agencies. But I think it would have been helpful to have that consistency across the board.
Well, Senator Alvarado, as always, is much more diplomatic than I am. I think if we separate out into our nation's response, our statewide response, and our local response, I think our national response and our statewide response both get failing marks. Our local response by our county judge, by Mayor Turner, have been as good as it can be given limited resources, the limited control that they've been given. I think they've done a great job. I think they've done everything that they can do, and I think, as Senator Alvarado alluded to, it's been extremely frustrating as a lawmaker to have to deal with the very inconsistent messages coming from both Washington, D.C. and from Austin about what we're supposed to do, about what the requirements are. And, I've not been shy about saying that our response from the governor has been just absolutely lackluster. Even today, or yesterday, as he was having a press conference saying that the number of cases, the number of people with not social distancing, the number of increase in cases, the increase in ICU bed usage is going up dramatically. We are on the precipice of another exponential increase in number of cases, and yet the simple thing that he needs to do is issue something as simple as a statewide order on masking, on social distancing. He's refusing to. I'm sorry. Those are like really, really basic stuff that people have said from the very beginning. If you want to reopen, then you do social distancing, you do PPE, and you do contact tracing. And our contact tracing is just now beginning to ramp up. I mean, something that we should have done months ago is just now beginning to ramp up. And not only that, now we have, and I'm sorry to make this partisan. I am sorry that this has become a partisan issue. But we now have Republicans in the legislature who are suing the state, suing Greg Abbott, suing Ken Paxton to get them to stop contact tracing. And this is the type of insanity that we're dealing with at the national and the state level.
We've certainly brought up several concerns that we're hearing from our members. Consistency is something that we've really asked for all along. We created the Texas Restaurant Promise before we were even allowed to reopen because we felt like it was important for restaurants to at least hear from us as an association what the best practices are from the CDC, OSHA, right? All of the different regulators, the state as well. And to know that and have that consistent message from the beginning. Would love to hear more on testing and contact tracing because that is something, especially now with the numbers going up and our restaurant operators, concerned that their employees or customers may have COVID. They're trying to get their folks tested very quickly, but are having issues with that, right? Whether it be the delay, the cost factor. I mean, we know multiple restaurants that have spent thousands of dollars that they really don't have right now to get their folks tested. And then even if you get a negative test, there's questions about, well, how reliable is that? Do you still need to quarantine and be tested again, right? So would love to hear more about what you think we need to be doing as a state, but also what businesses can do with our sort of limited resources, right? On the questions of testing and contact tracing.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, FEMA is talking about pulling out of Harris County. All of us, I'm sure Representative Loup is joining, we're writing letters to ask them not to leave because this is a very critical part of slowing down the process and preparing us for recovery. People talk about a second wave. We're not in a second wave. We are still in the first wave. And the opening, in between the phases, that happened a lot quicker than was originally said in the beginning. And what we have seen is something that we all knew was going to happen if you move too fast. Exactly what we have now. We're at 50% capacity on ICU beds here in the Texas Medical Center. If you've watched Dr. Hotez, I mean, he is, sounding the alarm now of what the potential is for the crisis that we're about to be in our state if we don't get better and stricter about masks. We know it's, your employees and people go into restaurants, it's not the first thing that people want to do. But we're all in this together. We all have to do our part. The issue with the contract tracing is, I believe in the concept. I mean, it's something that has dealt with global pandemics since the 1930s with syphilis or with Ebola. That process has worked. Where some of us has had the issue was the way that the contract or the contact was handled. And, it's a very large contract, $295 million. It did not have transparency like most of us would have liked to have seen. And so that's why I think you see some members who are suing. But I think if you just, we should have focused on that a lot earlier. Nothing we can do now about the contract, but let's move forward with it. Let's get aggressive like states like California are doing, where they're going to have, they're recruiting, I believe, 20,000 contract tracers, and they're using people that are not working within government right now. They're using librarians, they're using city attorneys who are not working on anything. And that's something that we can do to keep people employed. But that's going to be, a lot of contract tracers within their population. I believe it's maybe like 20,000 to 100,000. But we have to move forward with it. And I think some of the things that you all have come up with, your recovery, food industry recovery fund, I think that's something that if I were you, I would be sitting down like this and talking with legislators and with leadership in the state. Like I said, we're all doing things that we don't like to do. When the Texas Workforce Commission was on the verge of crashing, and I mean literally crashing their website, many of our employees transferred over to work for the Texas Workforce Commission and handle some of the caseload. So we're all doing things that we're not real comfortable with, but if we don't do something to stop the spread, to slow the spread, we are going to be in a even more detrimental situation.
Senator, I'll just jump in because this is where it's so critical. I think you won't talk to a restaurant operator that isn't committed to the safety of their employees and guests, right? I think this is what I like to remind people, that we work hand in hand with our health department, every day long before COVID. But where you're right, that recovery fund, we are really employing Governor Abbott to take a piece of that CARES fund that's come to the state and invested in the restaurants because they want to do the right thing. But for example, now we've come out very publicly to say that we support the use of face coverings. Where we have a challenge, of course, is having a frontline employee enforce something, right, that's not statewide, really puts them in and honestly, I worry about safety as much as anything. I don't worry about the loss of customer, right? I worry about safety. But imagine if we had the masks there on hand to say to a customer, please put this on before you come in. All of these elements that our restaurants are trying to navigate are so costly, let alone the plexiglass dividers, transitioning their entire business to delivery. They're giving up a big percentage of their revenue now to third-party delivery companies. And I feel like we just keep piling on. And yet there's this very great solution we found, which was this recovery fund, which would allow us to help these restaurants make this transition and keep people safe. And so, it's just that trying to get that over the line. And so any support we can get, Kelsey knows, the money would be put to such good use in the form of grants and would keep these restaurants open, but also give them the ability to pivot to meet these new guidelines that we all know we have to do to keep people safe, including our own employees that we can't operate without. I mean, we're a service-based industry. If everyone's ill, we can't produce a product and serve it. And we can't just hang something as a retailer on the shelf and hope in a couple weeks they come back. It's not our option. So I think that's where we would love any kind of support from you all just in this particular, because I just think this recovery fund is so critical for the sector.
Yeah, I think you'll have some great ideas with your survival plan. I like the idea of creating the food service industry recovery fund. And, I work along workforce issues, so I was really pleased to see that you're looking at a proposal to award workforce development grants to deploy high quality COVID-19 health and sanitation training to restaurants and bars. That's so important. I mean, we're going to have to retool and retrain people to deal with what's in front of us now and then in the future pandemics.
Your timing on that is perfect, Senator Alvarado, because we are actually rolling out that program, I guess today or tomorrow officially.
Oh,
so we're working with Dallas College, which is the Dallas Community College. We developed an online training. We're also working with a third-party company that basically sends secret shoppers in so that the restaurant gets actual feedback directly on areas where they can improve, and then they can take that training, right? So
are you looking for volunteers to go and eat in restaurants? I can volunteer myself and Rep. Loup.
We are always looking for volunteers to eat at restaurants. So yes, but yeah, it's a really exciting program. We were lucky to get and grateful to get a grant from the Workforce Commission to fund the initial piece of this so that restaurants can enroll their employees free of charge, which is just really awesome because, as Emily mentioned, most of these adaptations require a big upfront cost that restaurants just, you know, if you're closed for 6 weeks, you don't have a lot of money on hand to then change your whole business model and space. So we're really proud of that program and think it just shows that as an industry, we really want to kind of police ourselves, make sure we're setting high standards and actually enforcing those to keep folks safe. So thank you for giving me a chance to plug that. Representative Wu, did you want to weigh in more on testing and contact tracing?
I mean, I don't think there's anything a lot more to be said. In terms of the testing, we are coming up in the numbers that we're supposed to be meeting. I think as of last week, I think they announced that we're hitting 29,000 and change. Our goal was 30,000 tests a day. You know, it's still, you know, the more testing we have, the better off we are. So the more testing we have, the faster testing we get. Unfortunately, a lot of the test results are still not coming back for 10 days. Yeah. And that's a lot of time for people to not know and either not be able to leave and be stuck at home, or leaving and then risking getting other people infected. We could do, I mean, we can and should do a better job of that. We have lots of state resources. We have a huge medical center here in Houston. We have lots of labs that normally test like drug results and other stuff. Let's talk about converting some of those to do coronavirus testing. Let's just do, I mean, once we know the technique, it's not a hard thing to replicate. In terms of contact tracing, you know, my thing that I was kind of disappointed on is, look, the idea that we needed the contact trace, it was not new. And it wasn't this thing that, well, oh, later on, oh, we need to do this. Literally, we've been contact tracing for epidemiology for like 3 or 4 decades. This is really, really old hat. And the thing is that other countries, including China, Taiwan, Japan, all the places that already had coronavirus said, hey, the 3 things you need to do. And this is like, we had a teleconference between Houston doctors and doctors in Shanghai and Beijing that I helped host, that in February, in late February, was saying, hey, here are the 3 things you need. PPE for everybody, robust testing, and contact tracing. They said this over and over and over again, and our doctors kept asking them, so what else do we need? And they said, no, those 3 things. You get those 3 things right, you can reopen, you can do all these things. And even as we were headed toward reopening, it was still kind of, we're kind of there, kind of not, but whatever. And you know, one of the things that I had said from the very beginning is like, look, man, we have this huge medical center with all these med schools, all these med students who are not doing anything right now. Put them to work. If anybody knows how to do contact tracing and can understand the concept, is all these thousands of medical students who are just sitting on their ass, right? Put them to work. You know, have them sit at home, make phone calls. But instead, we outsourced it to I don't even think, they're not a Texas company. I'm not sure they're even a US company that's doing this. So I'll show you one thing, and I hope that this is not true. But this morning, I read a tweet from Dr. Hotez, who basically said the time for masking to slow the spread is basically over. We've had that opportunity, and now the infection rate is on a curve that masking will not slow down enough. And I'm hoping that that is not true. I'm hoping that we still have an opportunity to get this back down, because the only other alternative after this is a second shutdown. And this is from the very, very beginning. As soon as reopening was discussed, that we talked to our leadership in the state that this is what we don't want. We don't want a second shutdown. But I think if things go the way they are, I don't see what choice we have. And we still have lots of people who still refuse to wear masks, even with local orders.
Well, on that sobering note, let's talk about the economic piece of this, because of course a second shutdown would just be devastating to our economy. I don't know how we would frankly get through it. So, one tool that's sort of at our disposal as a state, right, is Congress with the CARES Act allocated about $6 billion to Texas, and then another $5 billion or so to our local communities. With the legislature not in session right now, it appears that Governor Abbott has a lot of discretion with that money. But obviously, as our lawmakers and Representative Wu being on appropriations, would love to hear if you have thoughts about how that money should be spent, where we should prioritize. Of course, we're looking at that money to fund the Food Service Industry Recovery Fund, a tiny piece of it, I might add, of that $6 billion. So would love to hear your thoughts on how we should invest that money, if there's a role to play for direct help to businesses, whether that be grants, whether that be PPE, right? A lot of different ways to do it, but would love your thoughts on that.
Senator, you're first. You want me to go?
I think she asked appropriations to comment first.
Okay. So sorry, the audio's not all that clear. So in the probably dozen phone calls that we've been on with the Governor Abbott, and also listening to his press conference and all that stuff, one thing that I kept hearing over and over again about the CARES Act money, about the funding from the federal government, is there's a provision in there that says, well, if you spend it the way we don't like, then we're going to claw it back from you. Okay? And I think that's been at least the governor's hesitation to say, well, we're going to be extra double careful with how we spend this because we don't want to claw it back. And my position is, who cares? My position is, who cares? If they claw it back, they claw it back from the state. Let's do it. Because right now we're talking about the survival of our state. We're talking about the survival of our cities. If it's just like, we're kind of in the gray, we're not quite sure, let's do it. This is the time to take risks. This is the time to be bold and be brave and go forward and do stuff. Don't be there and sitting in the back and just saying, well, let's just wring our fingers and not do anything. I'm sorry, and maybe I'm not the governor. Maybe the way he views it is different. But my position is, look, I mean, Rome is burning. And we need something to put out the fire. And I just don't know what else to say. And there's just so much stuff that I think, the cities have requested through the CARES Act, that your industry has requested through the CARES Act, and everything else that I think it's within arguability that it should be funded. And I think you're just saying, nah, we're going to play it safe. I just don't agree with that.
Yeah, and I would add too, I think the Treasury guidelines have been pretty clear that supporting businesses that were shut due to COVID, stay-at-home orders is a very legitimate sort of way to spend that money. So we certainly agree that it would be much better used out in the community addressing the needs versus us kind of holding on to it.
And can I add this too? I absolutely think that Congress should not have put all those restrictions on the CARES Act money. And I think it's unfortunate I did. I think it was compromises that were carved out with other people. But I think that they should not have put those regulations on, because right now what we're talking about survival. I don't think anybody's out here trying to game the system. If like 0.001% of the people are trying to scam the system, don't screw the rest of the 99.9% of us. And I really, I've been telling our local congressional members, there needs to be a second CARES Act. There needs to be a funding mechanism for our local and state governments for us to survive, because we need to continue providing essential services, and we need to provide provide help that doesn't have so many strings attached to it.
And Representative, I think we're on the cusp of, we feel the pain right now, but if you look at a sector like ours, last year it was just under $5 billion in tax revenue that we sent the state, let alone what our local tax is. Having our operations at 50% closed for 6 weeks and really dim results across the majority of the sector, you're looking at just this massive continuing budget gap for the people who need it most, or these local, where these communities and these citizens live. These are these local communities that need this to actually run this revenue. And so we agree completely. And I think sometimes we get slightly frustrated when we can demonstrate both, so data driven that the money could be really put to use to put people back to work, to take care of these towns and cities, thus improving the economic outlook of the state of Texas. And we can't make any, we can't get it moving. And it's just sometimes you sit here going, well, what else can we do? There is nothing else you can put on a restaurant right now. Nothing. They are carrying the largest burden of any sector in the state. And I just don't know what else we can do other than what I've seen other states do, right? Is take that fund like Tennessee and create grants for restaurants. Other states have stepped up and done this for a sector because they can see the long-term impact. And yet we're still sort of waiting. And every day that goes by, we have more restaurants closing at a very fast rate.
I mean, one thing that I would have liked to have seen that I think easily could have been done easily is if we have state and local governments just basically saying like, hey, we're going to put in an order for 10,000 lunches. We're going to feed our police force, feed our firefighters every single day. And we're going to have food delivered to the medical center. And anybody who's working medical staff, your lunch is on us every day. And I think that a lot of that, we spread that around to multiple restaurants. It may not save everybody, but it may get a few more to survive.
Yeah, we did something similar with that with some donations we received our nonprofit or 501c3 foundation. We did a Feeding First Responders program, and it was great because with that $1, right, you're helping the restaurant employees, and you're also helping our first responders. So it's a great way to kind of have the multiplier effect. So one question we've gotten from our members, which kind of relates to this, Janice said, I would like to see a law passed next session giving the governor the authority to activate emergency bridge loans after a disaster for small businesses. Florida has a model like this. Could we create something like that in Texas? What do y'all think about that kind of concept?
I'm not real familiar with that type of loan, but I know that we need to do more for our small businesses. I mean, look, restaurants are the second largest private sector employer in the country, and a lot of those are small mom and pop restaurants. I think we're going to have to come up with some sort of recovery, whether it's this type of loan that was just mentioned or the food service recovery fund that you have mentioned in your 8-point plan. I sit on a bank board, and so what I want to stress to folks out there is to make sure you have a relationship with your banker. What I've seen just wearing the banker hat is that a lot of folks with the big banks really are having a tough time getting through the loan process because they don't have that existing relationship. Now, it's been good for those of us who are involved in community banks, and we need to make sure that on the regulatory side at the federal level that we do everything that we can to keep community small banks allowed to operate, because the community banks are the ones that tend to provide more to the small business industry. And I've seen that we've been able to take folks that can't get a loan from their big bank, even though they've been with them for 20 years, and they've come over to the small community bank, and we've been able to get them through the process. I wanted to clarify something I said earlier, number, because I don't want to be misquoted, but I mentioned about California and them hiring the 20,000 recruiters. What the math comes out to is 50 contract tracers per 100,000. I think I misquoted a number, but it's 50 per 100,000. So thank you for allowing me to comment on that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying not to be like really seriously bitter about this, but this is actually a kind of a sore subject for me. Immediately after Hurricane Harvey, I had said, this is what we need. This is what the legislature can do right now. After Hurricane Harvey, I said the governor should call us back in a special session in January of 2018. We should have immediately taken about $2 billion out of the rainy day fund, put it into a zero interest bridge loan. And any local governments that needed to use that money to survive until they got federal money can come get it, borrow it, and then as soon as they get their federal money, they can whip it back to the state. Because we knew federal funds were coming, we just, as Superstorm Sandy and Hurricane Harvey has shown us, it just takes years and years and years. And there's a lot of small governments around the state on the coast that did not survive. There are cities that are now wiped off the map because they could not come back. And what I said about this crisis, even as a few months ago, that an easy thing that we could do right now for our local governments and for our businesses and everything else is have the legislature come in for a special session, provide a temporary bridge loan that says, we know federal help is on the way, and as soon as they get off their butts to do it, you take this money for right now. When you get paid, you pay us back at 0% interest. And that's what we should have done. I've said this, I've tweeted it out, I've said this on TV months ago. And here we are. We're still sitting and waiting. We have I think $15 billion rainy day fund right now. And, and our joke was during Hurricane Harvey, like, hey, if this is not a rainy day, when do we get to use it? And we did not put in the money for the bridge loan until 2019, until fall of 2019, after cities were wiped out. And this is what I'm saying, like, this crisis is going on right now. If there was ever a time that there was a situation that was deserving of a special session to deal with problems, it would be this time of monumental national crisis. But instead, we're going to wait till spring of 2021.
Yeah. I'd like to jump in there. I mean, many of us have been outspoken. We've been vocal about the need for a special session just to deal with things like, first of all, the economy. You saw earlier this year, the Texas Railroad Commission for the first time consider setting a process, a proration to slow down the production of oil. I mean, we have so many things that are staring us in the face that need to be dealt with. We can't push it down to January, and actually, we can't even pass any bills for the first 60 days. So you're talking to March before bills start getting passed. And when we've got this economic crisis and small businesses that are desperately needing our assistance, we can't do anything. And I think a special session would be in order. I think we still can do it. We have so many things to deal with next session, not to mention, that little process that comes around every 10 years called redistricting. And reforms on criminal justice and law enforcement, health issues also because of the pandemic. So there needs to be a special session.
And so I know Kelsey's going to jump on. I'd love just to touch liability. We see a number of states now at the state level protect, some type of safe harbor. And we're always clear to say for those that are following the guidelines, following the protocols, keep people safe. Causation with COVID-19 is very difficult, especially when we don't have a really, robust contact tracing today. And we have operators out there, anyone really dealing with the general public that is going to have the potential for drive-by lawsuits, or really a lot of lawsuits that could come down the path that they aren't even equipped to actually handle. We know that as a state that sort of was moved from Governor Abbott up to the federal level. Our hope was in the HEROES Act, or as I think Representative said, a second round of sort of funding, we might be able to secure liability. But in absence of that, what are your thoughts sort of at the state level? Because this is something I think that certainly concerns us. And long-term, we're going to need to get some type of protections in place for those that are following and doing what they can to protect the public. I don't know who wants to take that first, Senator or Representative.
Go ahead.
I'll talk. Sorry, I mean to hog the.
That's great.
As the lawyer, you gotta jump in on that one, Representative.
So here's sort of the conundrum, right? Most of your membership. So right now, if we do absolutely nothing, there are no protections. The standard of liability would be negligence, right? So if somebody got sick in your restaurant who was a customer, an employee got sick, it would be on a negligence basis, right? And they would say, like, you did not take the standard of care that a prudent, reasonable person in the same situation would have taken, right? And what is a reasonable, prudent thing to do? Well, provide your customers, make sure that your customers come in masked, make sure your employees are masked, make sure your customers wash their hands, make sure your employees wash their hands, you sanitize frequently, you do what you need that is recommended by the CDC, recommended by the city's health department, follow all state regulations. That's the standard. That's the negligence standard of liability. Here's my question. Here's sort of like where I understand your concerns, but at the same time, what do we do about, let's say there were places in Houston that well before they were even supposed to open were already open, and not only open but at 100% capacity, and sometimes over 100% capacity. There was one local bar here in Houston that the moment the Governor Abbott announced an opening, they were at 100%. And within 2 weeks, they had 4 staff members sick of COVID. Now, was that responsible of them? Did they meet, would you say that they met their reasonable negligence-based standard? I would say no, they were extremely, extremely negligent. So this is something that I would say we would look at for sure. That I do have concern that people would use this as an opportunity to do drive-by lawsuits. Would be very concerned about that.
And we see that starting already. We already see the folks in that arena lining up. And I think if you're an operator in a small business, you don't even have the opportunity to fight that. You don't have the means or the resources, but yet you've got the restaurant promise, you've got everything in place, you're doing everything you're supposed to do. You really can't determine causation, but yet you're now going to have to find the funds to fight that lawsuit. It seems totally unfair when we would be directly aligned with you, Representative, that if you are absolutely not following what is required, almost blatantly, you should have no protection, right? We agree completely.
Yeah, and that's something I think we should look at, not just for the restaurant industry, but for
it's for any public facing,
anybody. And because once the thing is, this is once a sort of a Pandora's box. Is once it's opened, then it can't just be the restaurant industry. Who else does it? My big pet peeve are the meat processors, who basically knew that they were having massive COVID infections within their staff, but forced people to come in anyways, and refused to provide their employees with sanitation or PPE or even following basic guidelines. I don't really want to protect those people. Those businesses that did that end up killing their workers, literally working their people to death, they can go burn in hell. And they need to lose as much money as possible. So that's all I care.
Well, and look at the impact downstream. Our restaurants now have meat prices that have tripled that they're trying to take on because of what happened in the packing plants, right? The downstream is we either don't have the product, or if we do, we're paying 3 times more when we don't even have a margin to make any money anyway. So we know the brunt end of what happened with the packing plants.
And I don't know if you saw the news, but it turns out there was no meat shortage on their end. They were shipping a lot of that meat overseas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'll have to just, getting better at that. Kelsey, I'm looking at the clock and I want to be respectful of time. And I know we have a lot of questions on here. So I don't know if we want to get to some of the comments of people that are dialing in through Facebook or our Q&A, just to be sure we hit.
Well, and unfortunately, when my internet shorted out, I lost all the history of the chat. Yay, technology.
No worries. Our life in Zoom.
Yes.
I'm looking through it for you right now.
As you do that, I'll hit on a couple more pieces of the promise. Couple of things that our restaurants are really clamoring for. expanded alcohol to go sales with safety parameters to make sure everything's sealed in the car and not in the passenger area. And also eviction protection, right? For many restaurants, their rent is their biggest bill. And you can't just, tell your landlord, hey, I'll pay eventually. So if either of y'all have thoughts on either of those pieces, would love to hear that.
Yeah, I think one of the good things we've seen come out of this for the restaurant industry has been the to-go alcohol. This is something that I worked on this last session. Senate Bill 1919 that I worked with TRA and some of the restaurant owners on, and that got put onto Kelly Hancock's bill as an amendment to allow third-party deliveries to pick up alcohol from restaurants and deliver them to homes. So I was thrilled to see this because I consider it, having a little ownership to that, and it's an expansion of that. So I'm glad that the governor has indicated that he's open to signing legislation. So I plan to be involved with that like I was last session. And then on the evictions, yes, I think that's something that needs to be dealt with because landlords are operating, again, very inconsistently. We know that there was some protection in the CARES Act, but that may be getting to run close to running out. So we have to make sure that that sort of protection is, again, once back into the CARES Act or whatever the next package of stimulus that Congress passes, and whatever we can do in the session. Absolutely, it is more than worthy of a conversation. It is worthy of some action.
Thank you, Senator.
Can I, just one comment on the alcohol to go. I think the alcohol, if you're going to deliver it, I think it's a great idea. My only concern is, locally we had a big fight about one of those daiquiri places. That was a drive-up place where, drivers can just pull right up to it and all the way up to 2 a.m. can pick up daiquiris to go. And it basically was like there was a piece of tape over the straw and that was it. I think if you're having stuff that's delivered, I think if it's being taken to your house, being taken to your job, I think that's fine. I think that's fantastic. In fact, we did it. We ordered some drinks to go and it was great. But I'm just concerned about places that are open past 10 a.m. If somebody's having one last giant margarita on the drive home, that could be very concerning. Harris County is already the DWI crash and fatality capital of the United States by a very wide margin. And until we have fully autonomous vehicles for everyone, I think we still need to be very careful, very cognizant of drunk drivers. If you ever drive around town and you notice some smashed up traffic light signals, you see smashed up street signs, a lot of that is people run them over late at night when they're drunk.
Yeah.
Just drive around, you'll see them.
Yeah, so Representative, we totally agree about that concern, and what we've proposed to deal with that specifically is that, first of all, any alcohol must be transported in the trunk or trunk equivalent if it's a hatchback or whatever, right? And then we're also proposing sort of a multi-sealed process, if you will. So no tape over straws, right? It's got to be sealed in a bag, and then a zip tie is one of the things that we're talking about right now, just to ensure you can't, pop open a lid, take a drink, shut it closed again. And we know there's other ways to do it. We know we've been looking at our sister states that have come up with all kinds of proposals, but we fully agree it needs to be sealed and it needs to be transported, not in the passenger area. I go crazy when I see our friends in the media who are trying to help us on this story, but they post pictures of, a sippy cup in the driver's cup holder. And it's like, no, this is not what we're talking about. That's New York. This is not Texas.
Although that is one of the only two violations that you cannot be arrested for, speeding and open container.
I didn't know that.
So, but now you know what the legislature's priorities are.
I won't comment on how that may or may not have anything to do with what people around the Capitol get into. Well, great. Thank y'all for that. It looks like we're about done. I'll just kick it back over to Emily for maybe some kind of wrap up thoughts.
Yeah, this was a great discussion, and I just want to thank you again for just your candor and your passion, right? We are in a crisis. None of us have experienced anything like this. There is no rule book. Common sense certainly prevails often, and we just really appreciate your partnership. You know, because you do eat out, and you're a small business owner. I mean, you know that these are real people and these are real lives, and these business owners need help. And so, as we get into session, we're certainly excited, Senator, to talk to you about the alcohol legislation again to get your support to solidify this, and of course, Representative Wu. I mean, really, I'd hate to go up against you in any kind of trial court. But I think, but that passion we need right now, we need solutions, and we need to know that if the sector doesn't recover, the state isn't going to recover. And so your commitment to that just really gives me hope as we go through this journey, and we get ready for that next session, which feels like a lifetime away, and a lot to be accomplished before that.
And I'll just add in closing, for everyone, please keep supporting your local restaurants, even if that's diet or takeout or curbside. Representative Wu and Senator Alvarado, we'd love to connect with you, just so you can help kind of promote your local restaurants and your neighborhoods, because I know y'all are both passionate about your local businesses and the restaurants. And just thank you. We'll certainly be continuing the conversation, as Emily said, heading into session. And we really appreciate your support.
Yeah, and if we can be helpful, right? If we can help you, if there's things you're seeing happening in your own areas, please reach out to us. We really want to be a source of information. So don't hesitate to call on us. Even if something isn't going well in your area, let us know, and we're happy to partner to help fix it.
And I would say, like, if you have membership that's in my district or Senator Alvarado's district, please reach out to us directly if we can help you with anything. If you have problems with state inspection or whatever it is that get through these hard times, reach out to us. We'll go to bat for our local community businesses.
I would agree too. I know you've got some local challenges. I know that the parklet permits, that's an issue you want to work on to expand your outdoor capacity. We're happy to help you with that. But I've enjoyed working with so many of you, and I want to thank Pico's Restaurant because they were able to very early on secure some masks and provide them to some law enforcement in a couple of cities in my Senate district. And I want to thank Representative Wu because he has a source that we've been able to purchase masks at a very, very reasonable cost. So I would encourage anyone, if you're in need, contact Rep Wu because he'll hook you up.
There, I get volunteered again. Thank you.
I love it. Now we're talking about who can give you masks under the radar. The world we're living in now, right? Yeah, we will definitely actually reach out, Representative, because we source masks or source providers on our website. So when restaurants are in desperate need of PPE, we have a vetted list of affordable options. So we'll definitely reach out to you on that.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Take care.